When you think of the food of Southeast Asia, the first two countries that might come to mind, the two places best known overseas for incredible cuisine, are Thailand and Vietnam. In spite of their proximity, just 85 miles apart at the closest point, they're wildly different. Thai food, a spectrum of dishes ranging from fiery curries to famous stir-fries. Vietnamese cuisine, revered for noodle soups and French fusion. The two countries are ancient rivals, long vying for power and influence and with a history of wars and conflicts. And today they're almost defined by how unique and independent they are. But there's a secret hidden deep in the corners of Bangkok. In the heart of Thailand, old communities of Vietnamese here for centuries and still keeping alive an old way of life. And old recipes too. Here you'll find not just Vietnamese food, but long-forgotten dishes and the stories that built an empire. So today we're following the history of the soldiers, migrants, and refugees who fled west to this side of the Mekong. It's the untold story of Bangkok's Vietnamese. It's 5:30 in the morning on Easter Sunday, and a small neighborhood north of Bangkok's Old City is just waking up on one of their holiest days of the year. This is a place without a name. Some call it Mitra Khan, named after the alley that connects Soi Samsen 11 and 13. But for Bangkok's Vietnamese, it's home. A place that's been a sanctuary since the first days of this city, and somewhere refugees, warriors, and even the father of a kingdom once watched this same sunrise over the Chao Phraya River. The church where we arrived is the oldest Catholic church in Thailand. Like all the other old Catholic monuments here, it was built by the Portuguese, in this case in 1674, back when Bangkok was still a small trading post on the way to Ayutthaya. Now we're here because it's Easter Sunday, and Bangkok's only Vietnamese market starts right at sunrise. But before we get there, we need to talk about this church, because without it, well, nothing else we'll see today might have ever happened. In fact, the entire history of Southeast Asia might have unfolded very differently. So forgive me for starting with a story. It's the year 1775, and here in Bangkok, this church has long fallen into disrepair. It was abandoned not long after it had been built when Narai the Great had died, his Catholic son executed in a coup, and foreign missionaries kicked out of Siam. And on the other side of Southeast Asia, the ruling family of the central part of what's now Vietnam was facing a rebellion of their own. 3 brothers from the village of Tay Son had united the peasants in revolt and were burning garrisons and picking up followers on their way to Hue. Within 2 years, all members of the Nguyen family, who had governed the southern half of Dai Viet for 2 centuries, were dead. Well, all except the 13-year-old heir to the throne, Nguyen Anh, smuggled to safety by a Vietnamese priest. Now at the time, the leading Catholic bishop overseeing the French mission to the region was a man named Pierre Pignot, and he saw in Nguyen Anh an opportunity. If he could align himself with the young heir and help him return to power, he could reshape Dai Viet into a Christian kingdom, not to mention claim a few trading ports for France. So Bishop Pignot devoted himself to Nguyen, building him an army and rallying foreign support. But things did not go to plan. The Tay Son rebels routed Nguyen's new forces, and when he allied with Siam, the Tay Son routed the Siamese too. While Nguyen's army was pushed back into Cambodia, the Tay Son, now ruling most of the southern region, became suspicious of the Vietnamese Catholics, thanks to Nguyen's ties to the church. So they began a campaign of massacres. Tens of thousands were executed, and by 1786, Nguyen Anh, his surviving soldiers, and thousands of fleeing Catholics took refuge in Bangkok. Once here, Nguyen pledged his support to King Rama I and fought on his behalf in Siam's war against Burma. And in exchange, the new Siamese king granted Nguyen's people the right to permanently settle a piece of land just north of the walled city and centered around an old and long-forgotten Portuguese church. Now, we really need to get to the market, but it's worth mentioning that Nguyen Anh himself didn't stay here. After only 1 year, he'd bring some of his soldiers and march back east, and following a long war. In 1802, he'd succeed at doing something nobody else had ever done: unify all of Vietnam into one single country. He'd rule for the next 18 years as the Emperor Gia Long. And even though he himself didn't stay in Siam for long, the families who came here with him are still here today, keeping old traditions alive even after almost 240 years. The morning market here in this neighborhood has been happening as long as anyone can remember, starting at sunrise on Sunday mornings and lasting only until the 8 a.m. Mass. The market spans the alley between the St. Francis Xavier Convent and, of course, the Church of the Immaculate Conception. In less than 2 hours, these secrets will be hidden for another week, so to find my way around, I've enlisted a guide. Gary Butler, the roaming cook, the YouTube host and Bangkok explorer who's the only person I know who's an expert on the food at this market. Okay, so we are 45 minutes into the 2-hour market.
Yes.
I'm still panicking, but I have food in front of me, so at least I can relax a little bit. And I have my bucket of coffee, which is so big that it's going to block us in the shot, so I'll put it on the chair. What a cool setting. This is so exciting to be here. Spring roll is good?
It's a very...
I'm making a mess of this.
Yeah, they don't hold together too well. It's a very acquired taste, but I'd love that laxa herb. You know, that like almost soapy flavour from the... But very, very good. What we got in there? Some boiled pork, raw yard, sausage, a bit of shredded cabbage. Lovely.
Okay, what are we eating? So we've got two things on the table. We have the spring rolls that we just bought up the block, which you and I just tasted, and it's delicious. Sausage, a little bit of minced pork, a lot of herbs, beautiful rice paper wrapper, very fresh. And then this soup, which, tell me about this.
So, excuse my pronunciation, Banh Canh Ca, so fish, Banh Canh are rice and tapioca starch, in this case noodles, so you get like a real thickness from the starch on the noodles, and then some people add that starchy water, cooking water, back into the soup to thicken it up. Depending on where you are, they can be really thick or really thin. So we've got the rice noodles. We've usually got pork stock, but today we've got pork and fish stock, and usually you get it with various different pieces of pork, as I said, minced pork, more yar, which is the sausage, ribs, etc, etc. But we've got it with bachon, which is snake head fish. It's a fresh water fish.
All right, so I'll tell you what's so interesting to me about this is, you know, I would have come here, if I knew nothing, I would come here and, oh, it's a Vietnamese market. I want my banh mi, you know, I want my favorite Vietnamese foods.
Right.
When you come here, you say, well, why is there no banh mi's? And there are people, I think, who sell baguettes occasionally here, maybe.
Yeah, but they're the sweet Thai style ones, but yeah.
Exactly, because the baguettes and the banh mi's came with the French. And when the French arrived, the people who fled are the ones who settled here. The people who live here, their traditional food was pre-colonization.
Pre-colonization.
Right?
We read that, I think I sent it to you, didn't I? Did I send you a thing about immigration from Vietnam to Thailand?
I don't know, maybe.
Was it not you? I don't know.
So.
I thought that was the sort of thing we'd have got into. But so the first settlers in Thailand were from the central region of Vietnam, so from Hue, the Nguyen dynasty, right? So that was the royal family's name, which is where the name for Vietnamese people, or Vietnamese soup, now they call them Con Vietnam, but before it was Yuan. Yuan comes from the Vietnamese surname Nguyen, because everyone came from Central. So although I say, when we're talking about Vietnamese food, and in Thailand, and we're calling it Thai-Vietnamese food and Thai fusion food, there is a good argument that it could have actually predated the food you're getting in Vietnam now.
The food here at this market is fascinating, as much for what you don't find as what you do. It's not just the banh mi's that are notably absent, those of course introduced along with baguettes by the French in the late 19th century. There's no pho either. That's actually been around for only 100 years, brought by migrants from southern China. And you won't find Bourdain's favorite bún cha, com tam, or any other regional dish from the north or south. Instead, this is a time capsule to Hue in the 1700s. Hue is here, pretty much smack in the middle of the country. Today it's the site of the old imperial palace, one of the most visited destinations in Vietnam, and that palace was built by Nguyen Anh when he returned home from Bangkok and established his new dynasty. The food from that city at that time is today all but lost, overshadowed by the more famous stuff of Hanoi and especially Saigon, which is where almost all of the international favorites come from. But here it's not like that at all, or at least not all of it. While there are mainstream dishes and Thai foods sold in this market, for a snack, Gary brought us to one cart serving something I'd never seen before. It's an ancient specialty of Hue, something I'm not familiar with, but if one of those first settlers showed up today, well, they might well recognize. I don't know what this is.
So this is a banh bao. Banh bao? Sorry.
She confirmed it.
So, I actually don't know the name in Thai, but so again, we're talking tapioca flour and rice flour, and these are steamed this time as opposed to being in our noodles, and topped with same kind of dipping sauce that we had with the spring rolls. So you're going to have lime juice, palm sugar, or white sugar, but. So lime juice, sugar, fish sauce, garlic, and then we've got some pork floss, some floss pork, and then we've got some crispy pork on top. So this dish for me is a perfect sort of morning market snack. It's just light and just full of textures. So for me, it's all about textures. You got those bouncy rice paper rolls, that crispy pork skin. You got the floss, but like it's just a nice light dish. You can grab this as we're doing. Go hit another spot, grab another dish.
Oh, this is fire. Let's keep walking. It's Easter Sunday. I would imagine that church service is going to fire up pretty soon.
Yeah.
And this market's going to slow down. What else are we looking for here, or are we going to work our way towards the
Now we'll work our way around towards the Kanam Jin, and then we've got to get some Banh Canh as well. Banh Quan. One.
By 7:30 in the morning, the market was already winding down as the people here in the neighborhood were getting ready to go to church. It's been a Sunday tradition since at least the 1800s, this small but tightly knit community coming together once each week to share food and worship. Local Thai-Vietnamese Catholics are getting ready for Mass at the oldest church in Thailand, but also another one too. And since we have some time, well, the construction of this church, 45 years after the Vietnamese first arrived, well, that's a perfect place to come back to our story. We left off in Hue with Nguyen Anh having won the war and taken the name Gia Long. We pick up 18 years later in 1820 with his death at the age of 57. As a successor, Nguyen had chosen his son Minh Mang, a strict follower of Confucian teachings and fierce skeptic of Western religion, picked as heir to placate the empire's hardliners. Almost immediately, Minh Mang would reverse his father's policies of tolerance towards European influence and begin a new wave of crackdowns against Vietnamese Catholics. When simple edicts didn't work, in 1825, Minh Mang ordered all foreign missionaries to come to the capital, on paper to serve as translators, but in reality, to forcibly remove them from the people. General Le Van Duyet, a loyalist to Nguyen Anh who had military control in the south, refused to comply with the orders and sheltered the region's monks and priests under his protection. Now, General Duyet had enough firepower to stare down the emperor, but when he died in 1832, Minh Mang ordered the desecration of his tomb, the execution of most of his family members, and the total abolition of Catholicism. Duyet's surviving son rallied an army of southern Vietnamese, led by thousands of Catholic troops, and began to plot a rebellion. Looking for more support, a French missionary under Duyet wrote a letter to the people in this community here in Bangkok, asking them to come back and help fight. But the letter would never arrive. It was intercepted. The missionary who wrote it would be executed. Minh Mang ordered the murder of all rebellious Catholics, and those who weren't massacred would be branded on the forehead with the words Ta Dao, meaning false religion. And by the time Minh Mang's army put down Le's rebellion, scores of his followers had fled west, inland, settling in Lao, the region known as Isan, and for the surviving Catholics, in Bangkok in this community. The population would more than triple. In fact, the neighborhood grew so large that in 1834, King Rama III granted land for the construction of a second church, named for St. Francis Xavier, today representing the eastern end of the Sunday market. Along with swelling these alleys, the much larger second wave of arrivals would bring their own food to add to this melting pot, introducing an entirely new category of cuisine to Thailand. Today, it's this stuff that's most widely associated with Thai-Vietnamese cuisine, with the most famous dish found all across this country, something that in Vietnam is barely known, a small regional specialty of a coastal town called Nha Trang. That's something known as Nam Neung, a rice paper wrapper served with sausage, fresh herbs, and a huge plate of toppings, things like unripe banana, pineapple, garlic, chili, and cucumber. It's the definitive dish of Vietnamese origin found here in Thailand and, of course, in this neighborhood, where after coming here in the second wave, one refugee family gained a reputation making this dish every Sunday, serving the post-church crowds.
น้ำเนืองนี่สมัยก่อนมันเป็นของในวังเวียดนามทีนี้เราอพยพมาจากเวียดนามก็ถูกเบียดเบียนศาสนาคนเวียดนามจะมาทางเรือก็มาขึ้นท่านี้แล้วก็อยู่บริเวณนี้ก็เป็นคาทอลิกหมดมีโบสถ์สร้างโบสถ์เล็กๆอยู่แล้วส่วนมากจะเป็นอาชีพหาปลาในแม่น้ำตรงไหนมีแม่น้ำคนเวียดนามจะไปอยู่เสร็จแล้วก็พวกแหนมเนืองพวกอะไรอย่างเงี้ยเราจะทำเฉพาะในครอบครัวกินวันอาทิตย์แจกกันกินหรือวันคริสต์มาสหรือวันปัดกาชิ้นเลยอะไรอย่างเงี้ยแจกกินบ้านโน้นมาให้เราหมูหันเราเอาแหนมเนืองไปให้แจกกันกินแล้วคนในหมู่บ้านเลยบอกว่าอร่อยทำไมไม่ทำขายแล้วก็บอกขายคนอื่นกลัวกินไม่เป็นก็เลยทำขายเฉพาะวันอาทิตย์ขายคนเข้าโบสถ์คนจะมาโบสถ์ก็มาซื้อกินหลังๆมาคนข้างนอกรู้จักก็ได้ขายแต่แม่ขายมาประมาณ70กว่าปีแล้ว
I am realizing I have done this incorrectly forever.
นี่กระเทียม
สวยมาก
This is so good.
ชูชีเวียดนาม
ชูชีเวียดนามครับ
first-time experience for me, having this hold its integrity after I eat half of it.
Usually I'm like this, take the first bite, and then I have to shovel the rest of it in because it's all dropping down my chin and stuff.
This is actually...
You've done the business there. Cheers, mate.
Cheers. You can't see, if you saw the backside of this, it's all falling apart. I'm holding it together. It would be impossible in this one video to explain the differences between Thai and Vietnamese cuisine, because that would first require explaining each on its own, and even that would be overwhelming. Maybe the best thing to do would be to start with something Chef McDang, the legendary Thai food master, told us a few weeks ago, which is that much like how French food is based around sauces, Thai cuisine is centered around pastes. It's the pastes that give the rich and intense depth of flavor to so much of what's found here. And I guess by that measure, classic Vietnamese food would be all about the herbs. It's an herb-based cuisine. Now, much like in Thailand, Vietnam is a big country with a lot of regional diversity, but ultimately it's the use of herbs that makes something so distinctly Vietnamese. Much more than a garnish, a central component that, along with stuff like fish sauce and lime, gives each dish a national identity. And it's the herbs, along with uniquely Vietnamese techniques, that can take something simple and elevate it to so much more. One thing that's fascinating to me about how we conceptualize food, how we think about these dishes, is, we put things in categories because we don't know any better. To me, this is a kind of spring roll. Spring roll, you put it in a roll.
Right.
But the name of this dish tells you what it really is, which is it's a sausage dish.
Yeah.
Bun cha is not a noodle dish, it's pork. It's a method of delivery of pork. This is a method of delivery of sausage. It's just, different cultures have different ways of eating a component that's the center of a dish.
Yeah.
And in this style of food, it's like, well, this is a sausage dish.
Sausage.
Everything else is just garnishes for the sausage.
Yeah. I've classified it as a kebab.
Exactly, right?
The Brit in me just wants it to be a kebab.
Yeah. I mean, sausage may be the incorrect term for it.
No, sausage is the correct term for it.
But that's the interesting thing, is that it's just, this is the dish, and everything else is the seasoning for it. This is delicious, no? Is that how you were hoping it was going to be?
Much better than I remember it.
The French arrived in force in Vietnam in 1858, Napoleon III having grown frustrated at the Nguyen dynasty's resistance since the first emperor's death. The countries would fight a series of wars culminating in the complete annexation of 3 Southeast Asian kingdoms by the end of the 19th century, combining Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos into the so-called French Indochina. Now, France didn't really need all 3. They only viewed Vietnam as economically important, given its proximity to China. And anyway, Cambodia was, by that point, in ruins, having been subjected to 4 centuries of battles between Siam and Vietnam, fighting over the old Khmer territory. And Laos had been all but emptied of people after being ransacked by the Siamese. But the French wanted value from their new lands, and so, to spark some commerce in Laos, they encouraged mass migration from Vietnam. And by the 1920s, every single Laotian city, aside from Luang Prabang, was majority Vietnamese. When the colonies began a war for independence in 1946, Laos, as much as most of Vietnam, would become ground zero for the fighting, with the Pathet Lao joining forces with the Viet Minh and the fighting ravaging the entire country. To escape the violence, huge waves of Laos Vietnamese would flee across the Mekong River into Thailand, establishing large settlements in border regions like Udon Thani, Nong Khai, and Nakhon Phanom. This was the third wave of migrants from Vietnam, and just like the first with their ancient dishes of Hue, and the second with the specialties of the coastal south, here again, we can trace the people's spread by following their cuisine. In this case, it was things like egg-based breakfasts and, of course, the famous banh mi, the food of the colonial era, something that when you see outside of Vietnam, it probably arrived between 1946 and the end of the war in 1954. It's not common in Bangkok. I mean, to come here, those migrants who came by land, not by boat, would have had to cross first from Vietnam into Lao, then over the Mekong into Isan, and finally from Isan to Bangkok, all within a couple generations. But the food does exist. And since the morning market's over and it's still not even 10 a.m., well, it's the perfect time for one of my favorite things on the planet, the breakfast specialty of the Lao Isan Vietnamese.
Okay, if you can see the smile on my face since we arrived here, this is just one of those things that is so like in my pantheon of my favorite meals. This is the Laotian Vietnamese breakfast staple, and you can get it in Vietnam. But in Lao, the very best thing to have in the morning is a baguette or made into a banh mi, or in Lao they call it the khao chi pate, and this amazing dish of egg cooked until it's crispy on the bottom with Chinese sausage. We have what can sometimes be Vietnamese sausage or fish cake, and I think this is fish cake. And let's just give it a try. That's amazing. I love this so much. Try their banh mi. With all this range of Vietnamese cuisine, and it's really interesting the things that have connected in different cultures, and some of it comes down to where the migrants were actually from. But other things are just based on what tastes connected to a certain palate. You know, in Lao and in Isan, you have things like this, you know, and obviously this came from colonial times because you have the bread in the banh mi. You know, this egg dish isn't something that has an ancient history. This all goes back to probably 19th century, early 20th century. But now, again, you cannot start a morning in a place like Vientiane without the amazing Lao-Vietnamese breakfast. I'm just absolutely in heaven right now.
The crazy thing about the long history between Thailand and Vietnam is that in relative terms, it's actually not that long at all. Since the beginning of time, at least since the first settlements in Southeast Asia, these two regions have been the home of powerful dynasties and influential kingdoms. The Champa, Annam, and the Dai Viet along the South China Sea, and next to the Gulf of Thailand, the Lavo, Sukhothai, and Ayutthaya, all preceding the modern countries. But there was always a buffer, with the Khmers, Lansang, and many more occupying the space in between, and allowing the two rival cultures to develop with almost no overlap, no mutual influence, even though they're so close together. It's said that by the first time there was any real and lasting contact between the Siamese and Vietnamese, both were already home to European settlers, with the web of influence extending almost across the planet, just not to their own backyards. Now, we can't know for sure, but we have to assume this invisible barrier was very intentional. The two countries, or the states that make up the modern nations, well, they could not have been more different, culturally and philosophically. Early Siam was devoutly Buddhist, and Vietnam followed Chinese Confucian teachings. They practiced different forms of government, built their own spheres of influence, and over the years, both went through long periods of isolation. It was only long after the Khmer Empire fell that Thailand and Vietnam would meet face to face, on the battlefield fighting for Cambodian territory, seeking control of the buffer that had long protected them from each other. The first of a dozen wars between Siam and the Vietnamese was fought in 1717, won by Ayutthaya and leading to Cambodia becoming a vassal state, however with territory annexed by Vietnam. The second war over Cambodia more than 50 years later would come at such a cost to Vietnam that it sparked the Tay Son Rebellion against the Nguyen family, triggering the events of this story. Over the next century, the two sides would fight again and again, alternating victories and trading claimed territory, with tensions only growing into the modern era. Thailand's fear of the region's wave of communist uprisings, leading to the Thais harboring pockets of Khmer Rouge, sparking Vietnamese incursions into Thai borderlands as recently as 1989. For the Thais in Vietnam and the Vietnamese in Thailand, they've always been outsiders, separated not just by language and culture, but by intense suspicion and distrust. That's why even today it's so hard to find one cuisine on the land of the other. Without question, easier to find a good green curry in Houston than Hanoi, and a proper bowl of pho in Paris instead of Phuket. But even if their influence never crossed that old buffer, people still did. And today here in Bangkok, when you find these places, old neighborhoods or hidden restaurants or even family homes, well, you might be rewarded with some of the best food you never knew was right there. Inside a small house in a working-class alley near Ram Khamhaeng University, there's a place that serves some of the best Vietnamese food found in either country. It's called Nai Dam, and honestly, it's the reason we did this video in the first place. I've tried for a year to figure out how to find a way to film here, one of my favorite places to eat anywhere, and a meal that feels like an accomplishment just having found the front door. Nai Dam is run by a half-Thai, half-Vietnamese family, with the matriarch having arrived not with any of those other groups we visited, but instead during a fourth wave of immigration in the 1970s, during the Vietnam War.
จริงๆร้านนี้เป็นธุรกิจของครอบครัวครับเป็นธุรกิจที่พ่อแม่เริ่มทำกันมาแล้วพอดีแม่ผมเนี่ยป่วยแล้วเสียไปผมก็เลยมาดูแลธุรกิจนี้แทนครับส่วนหนึ่งแล้วเนี่ยอาหารที่คนรู้จักเนี่ยก็จะมาจากคนอพยพที่อยู่ทางภาคอีสานซะเยอะอาหารเวียดนามที่คนรู้จักเยอะก็อย่างเช่นแหนมเนืองนะครับแล้วก็ข้าวเกรี๊ยวปากหม้อเนี่ยเป็นเมนูที่สามารถทำแล้วมันขายได้ง่ายเพราะคนไทยเนี่ยกินกันเป็นอยู่แล้วครับ
All right, so we have a table covered in some of the best stuff in Bangkok. This is such a hidden gem. One of the reasons why I wanted to do this video was because we've been looking for an excuse to find a way to work this into something. We haven't really had a video where it made any sense to come here until today. It's a house not too far from Ram Khamhaeng University, and this is second generation just making amazing homemade Vietnamese food, the style that we've kind of been trying all morning. But everything, you know, if you're in the Bangkok food community, you might know about this place, but otherwise it's really a hidden gem. Not really a sign outside. We're in a very quiet residential street. And the food, it's a very small menu. You come in and the owner will tell you what they have that day. They don't give you a printed menu. There's 5 or 6 dishes that they serve each day, and that's all. So today what we have, the Banh Canh, which is, even in Vietnam, I've never had a better version than the one they serve here. We have their homemade fish cakes, which I've never tried, and when I asked the owner what he would recommend that we put on camera, he says, you have to try this, it's one of our signatures. We have the Nam Neung, which is the sausage, which is here. Lost it right in front of me. And we're gonna see if I learn my lessons about how to actually put this together properly. And the Ban Xiao, which is what in Thailand you would see. It's Nguyen Anh. Coconut batter, it's just unbelievable how good this is. And yeah, so basket of fresh herbs. Gary told us when we were with him earlier that you know that you're somewhere authentic when they give you this, which is the laksa leaves, and that's on the very top of the basket here. Homemade sauces. Again, this is a labor of love. It's the original owner's son who's taken over, and everything is made by hand from scratch here. And yeah, let's dive in and try this stuff. You can't see her on camera because again, we are tight in the corner, but Daria's here. This is the first time in more than a month, yeah, that you've been able to actually join us for a small part of a shoot. And you know,
this teach me enough talk.
Teach you.
This is the best. I'm gonna eat all of it.
Oh, that's so much better than I thought it was going to be.
Right?
It looks like that should be dense and heavy, but it's not. It's light.
Perfect.
But that's the amazing thing about Vietnamese food, is that, what time is it right now? It's 11. It's noon, right? It's 11:58. We started filming this morning at 5:45, and we started eating at 6, right? So we're 6 hours into eating. You know, you're watching this, you know how much we've eaten so far. I don't feel that stuffed because the thing about Vietnamese food when it's done well is it's light.
Yeah.
You know, it's light and delicate, and I love the unique Thai-Vietnamese style. These things on the table. I'm gonna make myself another one of these, and Daria, good to have you back. Please enjoy your takeaway banh mi from the last counter.
Delicious.
Boris, time to start eating. This is delicious, and it's a lot of food, so we need your help.
Bangkok today is a melting pot. Somewhere each corner might turn up something with its own amazing story. It's also worth mentioning that since the mid-1980s, Vietnam has opened up again as well, and today, cities like Saigon are the home of, among many other things, a thriving Catholic community. As for the Vietnamese who are here in Bangkok, refugees from the old days when things were a lot more complicated, well, they still exist outside the mainstream. Their culture and cuisine might be a well-kept secret, but it's here if you know where to look. From the land around the oldest Catholic church to the farthest reaches of Lat Phrao, in the alleys of Ram Kam Hang and hidden throughout the city, in restaurants ranging from the most upscale to the simplest, humble counters. Their influence might not be well known, but it's there, in old-school Thai dishes still bearing the name of Nguyen Anh, to the Isan classic that came here from Nha Trang. Maybe it's for the best, at least when it comes to preserving some of the world's best food, that these powers are so fiercely independent, with Thailand and Vietnam serving as incubators for their own techniques and making this region, somehow after all this time, so incredibly diverse. On their own, Thai and Vietnamese dishes tell a story, each one the product of their own part of history. But together, well, that story's worth remembering too. And anyway, at least it's good to know that when we find ourselves in Bangkok craving something wildly different, well, maybe we don't need to book that plane ticket after all. Subscribe to the channel for more from OTR. Thank you so much to those who support us on Patreon. It keeps us going. Find the links below for our Patreon and social media, and we'll see you next week.
Brilliant.
Gary, so good
Cheers,
to see you,
man.
man. Happy holidays.
You too, my friend.
Yeah, see you soon.
See you soon, bud.
As we walk in the same
As we
direction.
walk in the same direction.
Did you drive here today, or you?
Oh, I'm parked up there.